All right, ready to dive deep? Today we're tackling Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now.
Oh, excellent choice.
It's that book that everyone keeps saying changed their lives,
It's definitely popular.
but it can also be a bit, well, dense.
Yeah, I can see that.
So we're here to cut through the kind of esoteric haze
Sure.
and get to the good stuff.
Yeah,
How to actually use this wisdom in your daily life.
absolutely. What I think is brilliant about Tolle
Mm-hmm.
is how he takes these big, kind of heady concepts like spiritual enlightenment
Yeah.
and makes them practical.
Yeah.
He doesn't just tell you what to think.
Right.
He tells you how to think, or really, how to stop thinking quite so much.
It's like he's saying your mind is a tool, not your master.
Exactly.
Which, let's be honest, for most of us,
Yeah.
it's a pretty radical idea.
It is.
So where does he even begin to unravel this, mind-made maze that we all live in?
Well, he starts by shattering a few illusions
Okay.
that we tend to take for granted. That whole, we're all separate beings
Yeah.
in a purely physical world thing.
Yeah, right.
That's just our ego talking,
Mm.
trying to keep us, feeling isolated and afraid.
Okay, so no more lonely island mentality.
Right.
So what's the alternative? Does he want us all, holding hands, singing Kumbaya?
Not quite. He digs into this idea that we're fundamentally interconnected,
Okay.
not just with each other,
Yeah.
but with the entire universe.
Okay.
And he uses some interesting examples to make his point.
Okay.
Like imagine a beggar sitting on a box,
Uh-huh.
completely oblivious to the treasure that's inside.
Wait, is this a riddle? What's in the box?
That's the point.
Okay.
Totally leaves it open-ended
Right.
because the real treasure is the present moment itself.
Yeah.
And the beggar, lost in his thoughts, is completely missing it.
Wow.
How often are we like that beggar?
Ouch. Yeah, that hits a little close to home. I can totally see myself scrolling through social media
Yeah,
while there's some amazing sunset happening outside.
totally.
But if we're so caught up in our minds, how do we even begin to tap into this power of now thing?
Well, Tolle argues that enlightenment,
Mm-hmm.
that state of deep peace and connection,
Yeah.
it isn't some distant goal for superhumans or something.
Right.
It's our natural state.
Okay.
We've just forgotten how to access it.
Yeah.
He points out that the Buddha simply defined enlightenment as the end of suffering.
So it's not about achieving something out there, but realizing something that's already within us.
Exactly.
But what's keeping us from this inner peace?
Well, one major culprit, according to Tolle, is what he calls the pain body,
Okay.
which is basically this giant blob of accumulated emotional pain from our past.
Okay.
It's kind of like this shadow self
Okay.
that just feeds on negativity
Yeah.
and sabotages our happiness.
Okay, so a shadow self that loves negativity.
Right.
That sounds a bit spooky. How does this pain body even work? Is it like a ghost in the machine of our minds?
In a way, yes. In a way, yes. It's like this invisible force that can hijack our thoughts and feelings and even our physical sensations. It's what makes us overreact to situations or hold grudges or just feel inexplicably anxious or depressed.
So it's like having this grumpy roommate who's constantly bringing you down, even when things are going well.
Exactly. And the pain body is particularly sneaky because it disguises itself as our own thoughts and feelings. We think we're in control, but really it's the pain body calling the shots.
This is getting a little too real for me. But if this pain body is so insidious, how do we even stand a chance? Does Tolle offer any hope here?
He does, and it's surprisingly empowering. He says that the key to dismantling the pain body is to become aware of its presence.
Okay.
The moment we shine the light of our conscious awareness on it, it starts to lose its power.
So it's like exposing a vampire to sunlight. But how do we actually do that? How do we become aware of something that's so deeply ingrained in our psyche?
Well, it starts with paying attention to our inner experience. Just noticing those subtle sensations, emotions, thought patterns
Yeah.
that arise throughout the day.
Okay.
For instance, let's say you're having a conversation with someone,
Yeah.
and suddenly you feel a surge of anger or irritation.
Oh, yeah, that happens to me all the time, especially in traffic. But what am I supposed to do with that anger? Bottle it up. Let it explode.
Neither. Tolle would say, observe it, feel it fully, but don't identify with it. Don't get caught up in the story that your mind is creating around that feeling.
Right.
Just notice it as a sensation in your body, like a wave of heat or tightness.
So it's like watching a storm pass by, without getting swept away by the wind and the rain. But does simply observing the pain body make it go away?
It's not a magic bullet, But it's a crucial first step. When we stop resisting the pain body, when we allow it to be present, without judgment, we create a space for healing and transformation.
This reminds me of something else that Tolle talks about, the importance of surrender. But he's not talking about just giving up or becoming passive. Right?
Absolutely not. Surrender, in Tolle's terms, is about accepting the present moment without resistance, allowing life to unfold as it will, without trying to control it or manipulate it.
So it's like going with the flow, but with a sense of conscious awareness.
Exactly. And here's the surprising thing. Tolle argues that true clarity and effective action can only arise from a state of surrender.
Okay.
When we're not constantly battling with reality, we can see more clearly, what needs to be done and take focused action.
That's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? We tend to think that we need to be in control, that we need to fight for what we want to make things happen.
That's the ego's way of operating.
Yeah.
But Tolle suggests that there's a deeper intelligence at work. There's like a cosmic flow that's always guiding us towards our highest good.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but I'm also a little bit skeptical. How do we know when to surrender and when to take action? It seems like a tricky balance.
It is, and there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Mm-hmm.
But Tolle offers a helpful guideline. Surrender to what is, and act upon what needs to be done.
So we accept the present moment as it is without resistance.
Right.
But we also take responsibility for our choices and our actions.
Precisely.
We're not just kind of floating along, letting life happen to us.
Exactly. It's about aligning ourselves with the flow of life, trusting in its wisdom, its power. And this brings us to another important aspect of Tolle's teachings.
Okay.
The role of relationships as a spiritual practice.
Yes. Relationships, the ultimate test of presence and surrender and all that good stuff.
Right.
But Tolle doesn't sugarcoat things when it comes to relationships, does he?
He does not. In fact, he points out that most relationships are dysfunctional because they're based on egoic needs and unconscious patterns. We project our past hurts, our unmet needs, our expectations onto our partners.
It's like we're all walking around with these invisible wounds, bumping into each other and making each other bleed.
That's a powerful image.
Yeah.
And it highlights the challenge of creating truly conscious, fulfilling relationships.
Yeah.
Tolle suggests that the key is to become aware of the unconscious patterns that we bring into our interactions.
So it's not about finding the perfect partner. It's about becoming more conscious of ourselves, how we relate to others.
Exactly. It's about moving beyond the ego's need for control and drama and creating a space for genuine connection.
But how do we actually do that? It seems like a tall order, especially when we're dealing with all this baggage from our past.
Well, it starts with self-awareness, with recognizing the patterns that keep us stuck in unhealthy dynamics. For instance, do you tend to attract partners who are emotionally unavailable?
Yeah.
Or maybe you find yourself constantly trying to fix or rescue your partner.
Ouch, those are a little too close to home. But what do those patterns tell us about ourselves?
Well, they offer valuable clues about our own unmet needs and unresolved emotional wounds. For instance, if you're constantly attracting unavailable partners, it might be a sign that you have a fear of intimacy or a belief that you're not worthy of love.
So our relationships can be a mirror, reflecting back to us the parts of ourselves that need healing.
Exactly. And by becoming aware of these patterns, we can start to break free from them. We can choose different partners. We can set healthier boundaries.
Right.
We can learn to communicate our needs more effectively.
This makes me think about how Tolle talks about the importance of presence in relationships. But how do we actually be present with someone, especially when they're pushing our buttons or triggering our pain body?
That's where the practice of surrender comes in again.
Okay.
It's about allowing our partners to be who they are,
Right.
without trying to change them or control them. It's about accepting their flaws, their imperfections, just as we hope that they'll accept ours.
That sounds incredibly challenging, especially in the heat of an argument.
It is.
But Tolle also talks about the importance of communication in relationships, right?
He does. But he emphasizes the importance of conscious communication.
Okay.
This means expressing our feelings honestly, directly, but without blame or judgment. It's about speaking from the heart rather than from the ego.
So instead of saying, you always do this, or you never listen to me,
Right.
we might say something like, I feel hurt when this happens, or I need to feel heard and understood.
Exactly. It's about shifting from a place of attack and defense to a place of vulnerability and empathy. And this requires a high level of presence, a willingness to be open and honest, and a commitment to working through conflicts constructively.
This reminds me of how Tolle talks about relationships as a path to spiritual growth. He seems to suggest that even the most challenging relationships can offer these incredible opportunities for healing and transformation.
He does. He points out that our partners often trigger our deepest wounds, forcing us to confront the parts of ourselves that we've been avoiding. But he also emphasizes that relationships can be a source of immense joy, love, and support when we approach them consciously.
So it's about seeing our relationships not as a source of suffering, but as a spiritual crucible, a place where we can learn to love more deeply, to forgive more readily, and to become more fully ourselves.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it leads us to another fascinating aspect of Tolle's teachings, the concept of the collective awakening.
Yes, the collective awakening. This is where things get really big picture, right? What exactly does Tolle mean by that term?
Well, he suggests that humanity is currently undergoing a profound shift in consciousness, a movement away from the ego's dominance towards a greater awareness of our interconnectedness and our true nature.
So it's like we're all waking up from this collective dream, realizing that we're not separate individuals, but part of something much larger than ourselves.
Exactly. And this awakening is happening on both an individual and a collective level. As more and more individuals tap into the power of the Tolle, now the collective consciousness begins to shift.
I'm starting to see the connection to everything we've been discussing. By cultivating presence and surrender and conscious relationships in our own lives, we're not just benefiting ourselves, but also contributing to this larger transformation.
Precisely. It's like we're each a drop in the ocean of consciousness.
Yeah.
And as we become more clear and radiant, the entire ocean begins to shimmer.
This is a pretty mind-blowing concept. But how do we know if this collective awakening is actually happening? Is there any evidence to support Tolle's claim?
Well, it's hard to measure such a profound shift, but many people are sensing that something is changing.
Fair.
That there's a growing awareness of our interconnectedness.
Yeah.
And a longing for a more peaceful, sustainable world.
I can definitely see signs of that in my own life and in the world around me.
Mm-hmm.
People are becoming more conscious of their impact on the planet, more compassionate towards those who are suffering.
Yeah.
And more committed to creating a more just and equitable society.
Exactly. And those are all expressions of the collective awakening.
Right.
They're signs that we're moving beyond the ego's limited perspective.
Yeah.
And embracing a more expansive, and passionate way of being.
That's incredibly inspiring. But it also raises an important question. If the ego is so threatened by presence, by the power of the country, now what can we do to overcome its resistance and truly embrace this way of being?
That's a great question, and one that Tolle addresses directly in the book. He suggests that the ego's resistance is ultimately futile. It's like a wave trying to stop the ocean.
Yeah.
The power of the now is always available to us.
Right.
And the more we align with it, the weaker the ego becomes.
So it's about shifting our allegiance, so to speak, from the ego to the power of the now.
Exactly. And this can be a gradual process. It's not about suddenly becoming a perfectly enlightened being. It's about consistently choosing presence over ego identification.
So what are some specific practices that can help us, weaken the ego's grip and strengthen our connection to the now?
Well, Tolle suggests several techniques, but here are 3 that are particularly powerful. First, there's self-observation, which we touched on earlier.
Okay, so the first practice for weakening the ego's grip and strengthening our connection to the now is self-observation. I think we talked about this a little earlier, but can you remind me again what exactly that involves?
It's about becoming the witness of your own mind, observing your thoughts, your feelings, and sensations without judgment.
Okay.
Like taking a step back and watching the movie of your experience unfold without getting caught up in the plot.
So instead of being swept away by every single thought or emotion that comes up, we try to create a little space between ourselves and our inner experience.
Exactly. It's like becoming a curious observer, watching the show of your mind with a sense of detachment. And as you practice this, you'll start to notice the repetitive patterns, those habitual ways of thinking and reacting that create so much suffering.
It's like those mind-identified patterns that keep us stuck.
Right.
Like in those love-hate relationships.
Yeah.
Or always attracting the same kind of partner.
Exactly.
Or repeating the same self-sabotaging behavior.
Precisely. By shining the light of awareness on these patterns, we begin to kind of disentangle ourselves from them. We recognize that we are not our thoughts, our emotions, or our past experiences.
Right.
We are the conscious presence that's aware of all these things.
Okay, so that's self-observation.
Right.
What's the second practice for strengthening our connection to the now?
The second practice is acceptance of what is. And this doesn't mean that we have to like or approve of everything that happens,
Right.
but it means allowing the present moment to be as it is without resistance.
So it's about letting go of that fight within, that struggle against reality.
Exactly.
Mm.
When we resist what is, we create suffering. We get caught up in what Tolle calls the pain gap, that gap between our expectations and what's actually happening.
Yeah, that makes sense. When we're constantly wishing things were different,
Right.
or dwelling on the past,
Yeah.
or worrying about the future.
Yeah, we miss out on the beauty and the richness of the present moment.
We do.
And we also drain our energy and create unnecessary stress.
Yeah.
Acceptance, on the other hand, brings a sense of peace and ease. It allows us to flow with life rather than fighting against it.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these practices kind of work together. So we observe our thoughts and emotions.
Yeah.
We accept what is, and then what? What's next?
The third practice is surrender, which we've discussed a bit in the context of relationships, but it really applies to every aspect of life.
So surrender is about more than just accepting a situation, right? It's about yielding to like a deeper power, to the flow of life.
Beautifully put. It's about recognizing that there's a wisdom and an intelligence that's much greater than our limited minds. It's about trusting that life is unfolding as it should, even when we don't understand why things are happening the way they are.
This makes me think about how Tolle talks about the universe as this vast interconnected field of consciousness,
Yeah.
and how our individual minds are like tiny ripples on the surface of this infinite ocean.
Yes, and when we surrender, we allow ourselves to be carried by the currents of this ocean. We trust in its wisdom and its power.
So it's not about becoming passive or giving up. It's about aligning ourselves with a deeper intelligence, a cosmic flow that's always guiding us toward our highest good. But how do we know when to surrender and when to take action? It seems like a really tricky balance to find.
It is a delicate dance.
Yeah.
Tolle offers a helpful guideline. Surrender to what is and act upon what needs to be done.
So we accept the present moment as it is, without resistance, but we also take responsibility for our choices and our actions. We're not just floating along, letting life happen to us.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot between acceptance and action, between surrender and responsibility. And as we practice these three pillars, self-observation, acceptance, and surrender, we begin to weaken the ego's grip and access the power of the now more fully.
This has been such an illuminating deep dive into the power of now. It's definitely given me a lot to think about, a lot to practice. What final thought would you like to leave our listeners with today?
If the present moment is all we ever have, what is one small step you can take today to become more fully present?
That's a beautiful question and one worth pondering. And to our listeners, I encourage you to explore the power of now for yourself and see what gems of wisdom you uncover. Until next time, keep diving deep.